We'll call this meeting to order. This is your corporation's meeting, and we will start by taking the roll, please.
Representative Brown,
Present.
Representative Locke, Representative Heft, Representative Johnson,
Here.
Representative Lucas,
Present.
Representative Webb,
Here.
Representative Weber,
Here.
Representative Yin,
Here.
Chairman Knapp.
Here. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the Corporations Committee meeting. We will start with where we left off, with House Bill 116, driver's licenses, unauthorized alien restrictions. And we have Representative Ottman presenting. Welcome back. Sorry we had to bump you a meeting. But if you could introduce yourself and explain your bill.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I understand about that, and so I'm just glad to be able to be here to present. So thank you all. Okay, the bill that I'm presenting today is House Bill number 116, driver's licenses for unauthorized alien restrictions. Good afternoon. Thank you again for hearing this bill. In Wyoming law, as a clear policy statement, this bill specifies that driver's licenses issued by other states to illegal immigrants are invalid in Wyoming. That's the whole purpose of the bill. First, this is good policy. In the last several years, we have seen the rise of sanctuary cities and sanctuary states becoming a haven for illegal immigrants. Some have announced, planned, and even implemented their own state legislation to allow what they have deemed unauthorized immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, 19 states have enacted laws to allow unauthorized immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. Now it is time for states like Wyoming to fight back by affirmatively recognizing and codifying under Wyoming law that driver's license documents issued to illegal aliens are not recognized as valid credentials under Wyoming law. So I'd like to walk through the bill, if that's okay.
Please, thank you.
Okay. First, let me say at the bottom of page 1, and going on to page 2, there's a new section. It would be 317143. And is created to specify that a driver's license or non-resident operating privilege document issued by other jurisdictions or a similar document which is issued to an individual that has markings, and we spoke about that earlier today on the floor, that the cardholder does not have lawful presence in the U.S. are invalid as driver's license in Wyoming. And B, defines an unauthorized alien as a person who is not a U.S. citizen and not lawfully admitted into the United States. Moving into section 2 at the bottom of page 2 and on to pages 3 and 4, this amends existing language in Wyoming law, exempting when a driver's license is required to ensure that these exemptions only apply if the license is not valid under 317143, which is what we just created. This next section on page 4 deals with 317134, which specifies now that no person shall drive a motor vehicle if the license is deemed invalid. Section 3 at the bottom of page 4 specifies rulemaking authority to WYDOT to implement this act. Section 4 on page 5 specifies the effective date. Again, I want to thank the committee for considering this bill, which ensures Wyoming does not recognize and deems invalid any driver's license issued to an illegal alien by another state, and I will stand for questions. I just want to reiterate the importance of a move like this. It's very determined, and that is exactly what it's doing, is to make sure that anyone driving in the state of Wyoming or voting in the state of Wyoming using a Wyoming driver's license as identification meets the criteria for that. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Do we have any questions from committee? Representative, or Vice Chairman Lott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Ottman. Quick question on just where it talks about any driver's license that has a marking. Do we have any feel for, in these different jurisdictions, how many may not be obvious markings? I'm just curious how broad it could be that this captures a part of it, I would certainly think, but there's this piece where it says the driver's license are not clearly marked and could be difficult. I was just curious if you could speak to that at all.
Representative Ottman?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, what I will say is we just heard in some testimony that there are some states and or municipalities, whatever, that are marking, but not all. And so to differentiate between who does, who doesn't, I have a list of states that have actually deemed that and put it into law that illegal aliens are, it is legal for them to drive in those states. So if they would even bring ID from another state as far as a license and try to change that, they may not be legal citizens.
Any other questions? Representative Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is are illegal aliens able to get insurance in the state of Wyoming, automobile insurance?
Representative Ottman?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Webb, I have not talked with the insurance about that, but I would imagine, well, I won't imagine, I would just say that in order for me to acquire are you talking about car insurance? If they want to pay it, they may be able to get car insurance. I don't know. This is primarily for identification to make sure that a photo ID is used for that and that it's strong as far as what it does. And I'll just say, for example, when I went to get my driver's license, I had to show my birth certificate. I had to show my marriage license. I had to show all of those things to show exactly who I was. And that's what this bill is wanting to do, is show, because we at this moment, we're working on it, but we at this moment don't have proof of citizenship as part of the law.
Any follow-up? Representative Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Ottman, I've read in the media there are people who are concerned that this is going to require law enforcement to go out and start finding these people and rounding them up. Is that the case of this, or is this will this be more of a, if someone is pulled over and found out that they have an illegal license, that this would come into play?
Representative Ottman?
Chairman Knapp and Representative Brown, this is to prove identity more than anything. It wouldn't be for rounding up people or anything. Also, it is for if you want to use a valid Wyoming identification, this would prove the strength of this form of identification for, like, for elections.
Representative Yin?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Ottman. So if they have a deemed invalid driver's license and they're driving, I'm curious on how this affects the driver's license compact? And maybe this will be something that other folks answer, but do you know, does this affect the compact that we're a member of?
Representative Ottman?
Chairman Knapp and Representative Yin, it is a privilege to drive in a state. You can trade in licenses. What this bill would do, and it says it throughout in the different sections, is that if the state that they have an issued driver's license in currently, if it's the same criteria as the state of Wyoming, that they can. But if it doesn't, like if they're in a state that says that you can drive and not be a citizen, then it would not. So if they meet the criteria that we have to obtain a valid driver's license in the state of Wyoming, they most certainly can get a Wyoming driver's license.
Any other questions for Representative? No? Okay, thank you, Representative Ottman. Next, we will have any agencies that wish to speak on this. Please come forward, identify yourself.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Misty Zimmerman, and I am the Program Manager for Driver Services at the Wyoming Department of Transportation. We come and talk through, as we walk through this afternoon, there's just a couple of things that we want to make clear. This does not change how Wyoming currently issues our driver's license. This does not change how Wyoming determines eligibility. Wyoming 317, 111 is what's required upon application for a Wyoming driver's license. And that is specified in there that you must provide proof of legal presence. So Wyoming will not issue this type of credential. This bill addresses credentials issued by another jurisdiction and disallows that person to drive within this state. So I will comment on Representative Yin's a statement about the driver's license compact. In Article 2, 317-201B of the driver's license compact, which is in our statute book, it does talk about will recognize and receive reciprocity for licenses issued in another jurisdiction. So just to answer that question there for you. The other thing that I think it's important to realize is, as Representative Ottman said, these driver licenses may not be marked. They may not have a specific indication. Most jurisdictions will issue what's called a driver privilege card. And what that's doing is that's ensuring that the person that has issued that driver's license can safely operate a motor vehicle on the highways, not necessarily that they've proved legal presence in the state. But again, not every jurisdiction marks those cards the same, so it would be difficult for law enforcement to determine at any time whether or not that person is here legally or not here legally. The other thing that I'll also just touch base on quickly is that oftentimes if you have a Wyoming driver's license and you go to another country for any sort of visit, and that Wyoming driver's license will allow you to drive on their highways typically for just visiting purposes. Same with another country or a person that holds a driver's license from another country. We typically ask them to get some type of interpretation on that if it's not in a language that we would be able to address roadside, but that license is valid for them to drive it here in this state or in this country as well as this state. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
I had one on that. So would they be required to show, if they did get pulled over, would they have to show their visa as well, or passport?
Chairman Knapp, that is really an enforcement question as far as the driver's license side of it, but we typically just require, or we recommend that they get a translation of that driver license from out of country. We don't have any other advice for them at that point.
Yes, Representative Weber.
I have a question. When it comes to the driver's license that are coming from people who aren't from Wyoming, if they're pulled over, whether they're whatever their status is from another country, are they also required to carry insurance?
Ms. Zimmerman?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Weber, again, that, I'm not sure on that, on the insurance requirements. As far as that goes, that's outside of my realm.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Are there any other agencies that wish to speak on this bill? Hello, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Knapp, committee members. My name is Carl Germain. I'm a Lieutenant Colonel for the Wyoming Highway Patrol. I just wanted to make a comment about the insurance that Representative Weber had mentioned. That is a state statute that if they're driving an automobile vehicle in Wyoming, that we would check for the insurance. And they would have to have it. Regarding someone visiting, say, from England, sometimes they have their passport with them, most times they would, and it's typically a good practice that you ask for that passport. When you have a member from another jurisdiction that has the driver privileges only, we just treat that as a normal driver's license. As long as it's valid.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Yin?
So, Mr. Chairman, Lieutenant Colonel Germain, how often do you see these driver's licenses that Representative Ottman was referring to?
Lieutenant Colonel?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Yin, are you referring to the driver and privilege only? That just varies. I mean, I don't have any hard data, but you know, as was testified to earlier, there are roughly 19 to 20 jurisdictions that have these driver and privileges only card. I think Colorado issues them, as does Utah. Utah is pretty clear. I mean, it shows driver and privilege only. Some jurisdictions you just can't tell, and I don't know if there's a way that we could pull data again, because when we get that driver's license and you run the driver's license, there's nothing that differentiates on the back end typically that says driver and privileges only. It's going to just say valid, not valid, but the physical card might indicate, you know, a change in the driver's license, and then you have a lot of jurisdictions that it just looks like a normal driver's license. And when we encounter that today, it's treated as a valid driver's license, and you move on with the enforcement activity. I think the intent of this bill, if you saw something that said driver and privileges only, in my mind, without I guess researching it further, we would treat that as an invalid license, and then if there was reason to do so, the only way to know if that person was here illegally or non-illegally would be to ask dispatch to run an immigration inquiry. But that doesn't necessarily, I mean, just looking at the driver privileges only roadside, if you're looking at the driver's license and running a typical return, there's no way to tell the status, because there is I'm sure examples of where those jurisdictions issue a driver's license that's for privilege only, and the person is legally allowed to be in the country. You would have to take additional steps to determine that.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, Lieutenant Colonel, maybe I need to bring up Ms. Zimmerman again, but so when you run the ID for an out-of-state card and it says valid or invalid, does that come from YDOT? Or where does that come from?
Lieutenant Colonel?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Yin, it comes from the jurisdiction. So when you know you touch a database, and it's going to be up to that state to determine if it's valid or invalid, or the jurisdiction. Wyoming has its own system that we report to other states. If it's California, they're going to have their own system for reporting the status. And roadside, you're going to find out if the license is expired, suspended, not valid for some reason. You have limited access to the reason for that when you're inside the patrol car, and then you can ask the jurisdiction for a driving inquiry, which gets a little bit more detailed. If the license is suspended, oftentimes there isn't a reason why it's suspended. on the return, so you would ask for a driving inquiry. Dispatch, again, has to contact the jurisdiction where it was issued, and then they can send more information back. And sometimes that information isn't readily available, might take up to 30 days to get it.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, follow up?
Lieutenant Colonel, I guess my question for you is, how easy do you think this bill would be to enforce if the jurisdiction is going to report that the license is valid anyways? How do you determine whether or not it is valid or invalid without going through this entire process? Or does this mean you're going to have to go through this entire process for every time you pull someone over that has an out-of-state license?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Chairman Knapp, Representative Yin, it could possibly require additional work in the fact that if the officer roadside is trying to determine the status of that person's citizenship by running a immigration inquiry, which would require a dispatcher to send that inquiry into NCIC and Homeland Security to get that back. And that report is a detailed log of crossings into the United States, when they arrived here, what their status is, if there's even record of it. Sometimes you run an immigration inquiry and nothing comes back, which would mean that they entered the country illegally because they didn't go through a customs checkpoint. If a person comes to this country and goes to a customs checkpoint, that's typically going to be logged and will show up on the immigration inquiry.
Ms. Zimmerman, do you have anything you wanted to add? Okay, thank you. Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lieutenant Colonel Jermaine, thank you for being here. So if you have to do one of those immigration checks, how long does that take?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Chairman Knapp, Representative Lucas, it can take upwards of, and don't quote me on this because I want to get like an exact time, but they're typically 15 to 30 minutes to get a full return back. I think some of that depends on the center and what it's going to and how busy they are. It can vary, but it's kind of similar to a criminal history check. If you're checking for detailed information about that criminal history, you send the request off, and then the responding agency has to issue it back. So about 15 to 30 minutes roadside that it could add to a traffic stop. Sometimes they come back a little bit quicker, and for various reasons, if systems are down, it could be longer, but that would be time added to the traffic stop.
Thank you.
Representative Brown.
Lieutenant Colonel, when visitors are here from another country, the driver's license that they use when they're driving, is that issued by the country they come from? Or is there a temporary driver's license while they're here?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Chairman Knapp, Representative Brown, in the majority of cases when people come to visit and it's not for an extended period of time, from what I have seen and what I know, they just use the country that they came from's driver's license. And that could be from Australia, England, Mexico, someplace down in South America, really, if it's a valid license. Now, there are international driver's licenses that, that can be issued if they're going to be here for an extended period of time. Maybe they're a student, they're here on a work visa that I've seen issued. But typically, if it's the tourist coming to the United States, say to visit Yellowstone, and they have enforcement or an encounter with law enforcement, it's going to be the country that they're coming from. In those cases, Representative Brown, the officer treats it like a valid license. You can run the name and date of birth through the NCIC database. And if there's a want or warrant that's been entered into Interpol, that would flag. But in most cases, we don't have the ability to know if that license is valid or invalid or suspended if it's coming from a different country, with the exception of Canada and some of the Mexico states with CDLs. It's kind of hit or miss if we'll get a return. But in most cases outside of the North American continent, we don't get a return for the validity of that driver's license.
All of that.
Yes, Representative Brown.
So, Lieutenant Colonel, with this bill, this becomes law. This would be a completely different thing compared to someone who is here visiting, correct?
Lieutenant Colonel?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Brown, I guess I would need to reread the bill because the way that I understand it is it was referencing driver's licenses from other jurisdictions that indicated that it was for driving privileges only, and the intent of the bill was whether these people were United States citizens or not. To what I testified earlier to, the only way to know that would be to, or if they were in the country legally, would be to run the immigration inquiry.
Follow up?
So if a person is here visiting from another country, they would have a driver's license from that country, more than likely, or an international driver's license. Someone with a driver's license from another country who came here illegally would have a license from the state that they're residing in that indicated it was a non-resident driver's license. In some cases, not at all, correct?
Lieutenant Colonel?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Brown, I think the answer to that question would be yes, with some exceptions of, sometimes, well, people are here in this country that are not documented or aren't lawfully allowed to be here that do carry a driver's license from a foreign jurisdiction. So sometimes we do see that as well. And, typically, if you ask for like a passport with those people, they may or may not have it. And there's going to be more interaction with that person as far as just some basic questions, where are you coming from, where you're going. And usually that some of those answers different from, well, I flew into Denver 2 nights ago, I'm traveling up to Yellowstone. Or I'm here at the university going to school. Typically people that are here visiting are pretty upfront and able to explain that if they've been in the country for longer periods of time, and if you have law enforcement contact with them, every situation is going to be different, Representative Brown.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Yes, Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Knapp, thank you. Sorry, I just would like to add one more thing to my previous testimony. This talks about driver's license issued in another jurisdiction where the person is an unauthorized alien. There are instances where jurisdictions will allow a person that is here lawfully to obtain a card without proving legal presence because they choose not to. So there could be instances in this scenario where someone is in fact a legal in the States, or in the United States legally, but has chosen not to provide the documentation required to prove legal presence to obtain one of these driver's licenses. That does not happen in Wyoming because you cannot make that decision. You have to prove legal presence in Wyoming, but some jurisdictions do offer a customary card that they are not required to prove legal presence, but they are in the country legally.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, any other agencies? I did see Secretary Gray. I don't know, he left the room. Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to him. I'm gonna move on to the public. Is there anybody here present that is from the public in favor of the bill? If you could approach, anyone? Okay, anyone here from the public that is against the bill? No? All right. Oh, go ahead, come on up. Please identify yourself.
Hello, my name is Antonio Serrano. I'm the Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Wyoming. The ACLU of Wyoming is here today in opposition to House Bill 166, which invalidate out-of-state driver's license for undocumented immigrants, charging them with a misdemeanor. So before I worked for the ACLU, I worked every labor job under the sun here in Wyoming. I know what that summer heat feels like. I know what that wind and ice feels like because I spent most of my life working in it. I'm sure we can all agree that the work of people in Wyoming is what keeps Wyoming going. Labor is what keeps our state alive. I'm born and raised in Wyoming, and I'm the son of an immigrant. So that gave me the privilege of growing up and spending most of my working life here in Wyoming among immigrants. It didn't matter if I was putting on siding in Laramie, pouring concrete here in Cheyenne, or roofing in Pine Bluffs. Immigrants were there. They are building our state, and they are part of Wyoming. And I can tell you, this bill is not making our state any safer or any better, and all it does is send a clear signal that Wyoming is becoming anti-immigrant. By expanding access to driver's license for undocumented residents, other states have helped increase safety on the roads. This happens through road test exams, driver identification, and car insurance usage. Plain and simple, the roads are safer if everyone using them has passed a driver's test and is licensed. States that have extended driving privileges to undocumented residents have seen a positive effect and they can have on their traffic. This is not something that we need to be fighting back against here in Wyoming. This bill is also questionable on the legal merit in that it requires that Wyoming deviate from its commitments and obligations to recognize the validity of driver's license issued by other U.S. states. The full faith and credit clause of the U.S. Constitution found in Article 4, Section 1 requires states to respect each other's laws. 19 states and D.C. currently provide undocumented immigrants with access to driver's license. Wyoming is not one of those states. While the issuance of driver's license in other states generally does not obligate Wyoming to issue identification to undocumented people, banning Wyoming from recognizing these lawfully obtained licenses is concerning. In 2023, the economic impact of travel report showed that tourism is Wyoming's second largest industry, affecting all 23 counties. Approximately 8.7 million visitors made a trip to Wyoming last year, and those visitors spent $4.8 billion on goods and services provided by Wyoming businesses. This will hurt our tourism industry along with people who depend on it. The towns and businesses that live along I-80 and I-25 depend on the business that comes from people coming to visit or to pass through our state. If people don't feel safe passing through Wyoming and choosing alternative routes or alternative destinations, we will be hurting Wyoming business owners and the towns that depend on tourists. This bill will dissuade potentially millions of our neighbors from visiting our beautiful Wyoming. Immigrants are not hurting our state. They're a vital part, and we ask you to vote no on this bill. I stand for any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming and testifying. Okay, we're going to go back to agencies. Secretary Gray, did you have any comments on this particular bill?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to say that I'm in full support of providing a clear statement as a state that driver's licenses issued to illegal immigrants are not valid for any purpose. And for purpose of voter registration, for purpose of voter ID, and we're working on this issue from a number of different angles, but I think this is a very important part of that effort, House Bill 116. And I just want to reiterate my support. I think it's a long time coming. We did the ban on sanctuary cities. We tried it 4 times across 4 years, and we're not able to get it done. And I think we have considerable catch up in Wyoming on this, the Wyoming State Legislature on this issue. And I really appreciate this committee and the House working on this issue. And I'm in complete and total support of House Bill 116.
Thank you. Any questions for Secretary Gray? Seeing none. Is there anybody online from the public that wishes to speak on this bill? Okay. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes, thank you. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Deacon Mike Lehman. I am with the Catholic Diocese of Cheyenne, which represents the Catholic Church in Wyoming. And I first want to affirm our belief that every sovereign nation has the right and responsibility to protect its borders. And we share the frustration that many have with the federal government's seemingly lack of interest in securing the border, with bringing about much needed reform to the immigration system. And I think that what we're seeing with the many immigration related bills this session, it's a result of that shared frustration. Immigration reform should lead to a system that's predictable for those seeking to come here, and it should not depend upon the pendulum swing that's been happening between partisan administrations. Reform should also be proportional and humane, and comprehensive immigration reform should also take into account the question of subsidiarity, asking, what are the particular responsibilities between the federal, the state, and the local governments? The state, I think, does have a role to play, and it's important to remember that the changes being discussed here, though, do not just impact the possibility of immigrants coming here tomorrow. We already have people here in Wyoming and who will be impacted by any changes, and so it's important to keep that in mind. I'll talk just briefly about the principle of human dignity. I talk about it a lot on different issues, and I plan to do the same hopefully next week with regard to the abortion regulation bills. Human dignity is inherent to the individual. It in no way depends upon the valuation of another person or group of persons, no matter how powerful that group of persons may be. Human dignity is not assigned by government. A just government merely protects what is already there. And that's true of the preborn. It's also true of people coming into our country. The problem with is, I think, with some of these issues, they get so politicized that they kind of become abstract for us. But when we see the human persons involved, whether it's the preborn child or the undocumented immigrant and their families, the conversation, I think, can kind of take on a new tone. Now, of course, undocumented immigrants don't enjoy the full rights of citizens. That makes sense. But I think we do need to exercise some caution to not set a precedent in our law and also in our way of thinking that the differences between human rights and citizens' rights aren't significant. Driving, as the good sponsor of the bill brought to our attention, it's a privilege, it's not a human right. But as a Wyomingite who has lived here all my life, minus the time I was in college and when I was in the service, I think about how critical driving is to survival, especially on a weekend like we're starting to experience this weekend. And I'm just a little bit concerned about what this might do to families that are already here. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate, and members of the committee, I appreciate the sponsor bringing the bill and raising this important conversation. And I would just emphasize the importance of, our consistency and standing on principles like human dignity. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would pause and stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. Are there any questions? No, I appreciate you testifying today.
Thank you so much. Safe travels to you all as you go into the weekend, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Are there any other people online?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Representative Ottman. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. If I may just comment on a couple of the comments that were made. I think it's necessary for just some clarification of what this is for and why I felt so compelled to bring it. First off, here in Wyoming, we use driver's licenses as a form of identification for a lot of things. And why it is a good form of identification and can be is because it, as I said before, I had to show my birth certificate So right there, that's proof of citizenship. That shows that, that I was born in this country and that, that I'm here as a citizen, okay? So that is one of the things, and to be able to be used as a valid and documented form of identification is also very important. Representative Brown, you were talking about unauthorized aliens. There are people in this country, as the Uber business grows and things, people that are here as undocumented or unlicensed people, but nevertheless here legally. So if we look at 317107, it talks about people that are exempted. Any employee of the United States government under Romanet 1, while operating a motor vehicle owned by or leased to the United States government and being operated on official business, unless the employee is required by the United States or any agency thereof to have a state driver's license. So there you see, as far as government people coming in, if it's required in their job that they have a valid driver's license, then they need to meet the criteria here. Romanet 2, a non-resident who has in their immediate possession a valid license issued to him by licensing authority in his place of residence, if the non-resident's license is not invalid. So if their state issues a license that meets the criteria of our state, there's no problem at all. And as we talked about, I have a list of states here that have issued licenses to and said that they issue things differently, whether it might be for Social Security or something else. Colorado, California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Nevada, Oregon, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, and District of Columbia. And in one state, well, I'll just go on. The other thing was that the gentleman that was talking about the importance of having immigrants here, we all know that this country was based a lot on immigration. I mean, we all have history of immigration there. But what I will say with the full faith and credit clause that was referenced, with the full faith and credit clause of the United States, it allows Wyoming to refuse recognition of driver's licenses from other states if marked to indicate the holder did not provide proof of lawful presence in the United States. The full faith and credit clause requires that states respect the laws and judgments of other states. Okay. For example, in the context of driving laws, other courts have said the full faith and credit clause does not require a state to subordinate its public policy with respect to persons and their actions within its borders to the laws of another state. So we are totally in our rights as Wyoming to say, since we use these driver's licenses as criteria for so many other things, we are also able to make the criteria on which they are obtained. So if there's any questions, I thank you for allowing me to add those remarks.
All right, I'm going to close public comment if there's no other person in the audience or online that wishes to speak. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Representative Weber, seconded by Representative Johnson. Any discussion from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I think Mr. Lehman's comments really undercut I mean, my reason for voting was I didn't think it's really that enforceable, but I think Mr. Lehman's comments really undercut why I ran for office, why I continue to try to lead in the state of Wyoming, and that's, do I start with the idea that I'm leading with kindness? Do I start with the idea that I'm solving a problem? And what is the problem that I'm solving? If the problem that we're solving, and I totally agree. I think our immigration process, with regards to immigration, our immigration process right now is really screwed up. It's broken. We all know it's broken. And it frankly, getting it fixed on the federal level, I think is going to be very, very difficult, and I don't think it's going to be something solved anytime soon. But then with regards to how we treat the people that are here now, regardless of their immigration status, do we leave them out in the cold? And it gets cold here. Is that who we are in Wyoming? So, gonna vote no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Vice Chairman Lott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just my 2 cents on the bill. I know there's some complex issues, but at the end of the day, this is specifically, or as I read it, is specifically guided toward the people who have come, the unauthorized aliens, very clearly, people who have not lawfully been admitted to the United States. So at the end of the day, this is the beginning of the process to start to say that they're not here in a valid way. It goes back to, are you here lawfully or are you here unlawfully? And I think this is a good first step to start down this process and gives the department the right to start to put some rules in place to make sure that lawful people are here and lawful people run our highways and roads. Thank you.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any amendments? Okay, seeing none, would you please roll call the vote? For House Bill 116, driver's license unauthorized alien restrictions.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Locke, Representative Heft, Representative Johnson,
Aye.
Representative Lucas,
Aye.
Representative Webb,
Aye.
Representative Weber,
Aye.
Representative Yin,
No.
Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
8 ayes and 1 no.
Okay, House Bill 116 does pass. On to our next bill. House Bill 122, Senior Citizen Service Districts, Authorization and Renewal. Representative Conley, welcome.
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you for allowing me to do this afternoon. I'm here today to ask approval from this committee for House District Bill number 122, an act relating to counties, amending the length of time for approval of a mill levy proposition for senior center service districts, amending the process for reconsidering mill levies for senior citizen service districts, and providing an effective date. There are a number of, I believe about 12 different senior center service districts in the state right now. And this bill would be very helpful to the seniors of our state. What it does is it changes the position of when mill levies are submitted they go through their first election, they're approved, and then the electors within the proposed district at the first general election the old bill says it will be held 2 years, and we would like to have 4 years after the election authorizing the district. And if the proposition to continue a mill levy under this subsection is approved, the mill levy would continue until the proposition was to be rescinded by the residents or the electors in the county, or the adoption of a resolution by the Board of County Commissioners could then propose the rescinding of the district. So what it does is it gives the districts that provide services to all of our seniors across the state, it preserves and protects senior services and their programs by allowing them to develop their programs and continue those without having to go back to the voter and not be assured that their district is going to be held whole every 2 years. It makes it difficult. Our senior centers are so active and do all kinds of different programs across the state. And like I said, this would just help them be able to continue to function and do it in a precise manner. There are other districts, special districts, that function under this same kind of method. Community college districts, rural healthcare districts, hospital districts. They don't have to go through what the senior center special districts do to keep their district going and their mill levies approved. This does not change the amount of a mill levy that the district can have. Right now, the senior district can have 2 mills. It doesn't change that. They still have to go and get those mills approved. And so that's something that won't change. And I did some figuring, and roughly a mill levy, the cost, depending on what a district does, can vary from county to county. And it depends on if they take their full two mills or if they take a half a mill or 1 mill. But that can cost residents $20 to $57 a year. It's a mill that people voluntarily put in, vote for, and approve for their communities. I would like to ask Jessica to come up and give some other information on these senior center special districts right now, if that's okay.
All right, she can come up now, and then if we have any questions first, we'll do that, and then we'll hear from her. I had one question.
Okay.
So if you were 2 years into the district on a 4-year basis, and somebody came with a proposition to rescind, as I understand it, that would be voted on in that next general election, or the next 4-year election?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. And we'll have comments. We will kind of shorten this up a little bit. We have 2 other bills besides this one. So if you have some comments and then questions for either the representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Jessie Defoe, and I'm here with the Wyoming Senior Services Association. And so knowing the time is short, I have more remarks and more comments if anyone needs them. But in lieu of time, just to note that 23.3% of the population is 60 or older. Between 2010 and 2021, that group increased 47%. And right now, 61% of Wyoming seniors are part of the young old, which is the 60 to 74. These senior centers are the hearts of the community. That's where a lot of other public meetings are held. And as you all know, especially in small communities, staff is small and they must run a really lean operation. So preparing for continual promotion of renewal is difficult for the staffs to keep up with on top of all their programming. And when I say programming, what they do is they provide an opportunity for seniors to stay in their homes longer. So they provide meals and transportation and a lot of those services that our seniors need. Right now, it's estimated, I can tell you, recent studies show that for every dollar invested in our community-based services like senior centers, it saves the state up to $5 in Medicaid and long-term expenses. And so that makes a huge difference. Additionally, right now, the Wyoming Home Services, which is what the senior centers provide, that annual cost is right around $2,800 a person. Whereas when you look at nursing home costs, that cost is almost $84,000. So what these senior centers provide is a critical service. And so to allow them the opportunity to operate like other special districts do is really important for our communities. And online, I know that we have an executive director from a senior center, as well as board members who are happy to answer questions as well.
All right, thank you. Any questions for either Representative Conley or Ms. DeBoe? Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask this question of Ms. DeVoe because I did talk to Representative Connolly this morning and ask questions. Do you know of the services that are provided to the senior district, what, if any, of these are income limited services so that, people who really need help are getting it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. DeBoe.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Lucas, for that question. Each district is just a little bit different. And in fact, can we see if Mr. Mock is online? Because I would love for him to speak to this directly of how this affects his county, if that's possible.
We'll let him into the room.
Cheryl Benner
Or yeah, I was gonna, oh, perfect. Sorry, they're all together at the senior center, if you don't mind, that's perfect.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is AJ Mock, and I'm sorry. Could you please repeat the question? Mr. Chairman, I believe you guys are muted on your end. I can't hear anything.
Okay, I'm going to get better
Okay,
at this the third
Representative
one.
Lucas.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, now we are not muted. I was curious to know if you know of the various services that are offered by the differing senior districts, which, if any, of those services are income limited.
So none of our services are income limited, but we do have certain programs that are a fee for service. So our transportation services are a fee for service. And we also have programs that require, we have to look at their income levels on a sliding fee scale. So if their income level is higher, we do charge more for those services, and if their income level is lower, we'll charge less for those same services, depending on their income level.
Representative, follow-up? Representative Weber.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I know the senior centers are very important. I still have a couple of questions, though. What kind of programs do you offer at the senior center?
And Mr. Chairman and Representative Weber, again, I would love to have Mr. Mock weigh in because it's quite an extensive list from transportation to home services to healthcare. So Mr. Mock, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Weber. So we offer home delivered meals, congregate meals, public transportation for our community. Also in a daybreak service, we offer activities, wellness services, and we also offer home health services. It's just a quick rundown. We do offer these services in Buffalo as well as in KC as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, might I?
Yes,
Help answer?
Representative Conley.
Representative. One of the other things that I think is very valuable that the senior centers do is they help people with their, get signed up for Medicare. And which is a big deal. It's hard to do, and those services are free to the residents in their communities, and they could go and get that assistance to get signed up for those services, and that's another important one. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Weber, follow up.
Thank you, Chairman. My next question is, has any senior center district not requested the full 2 mil levy in the last 10 years, 20 years?
My name is Cheryl Banner. I'm a, whoops, sorry.
Sorry. Could you identify yourself for us, please?
Yes, my name is Cheryl Banner. I'm a past member of the Johnson County Senior Citizen Service District. We chose not to go for the full mill initial, or for the full 2 mills initially. We only levy 1 mill in Johnson County.
Follow up?
Yes. So was this recently? Do you do it every 2 years? You do not request the 2 mil levy, you just request 1 mil?
Ms. Benner?
Chairman Knapp, Representative Weber, initially on the question to the voters, it was that the district be passed with the authority to assess 1 mill. So we haven't even asked the voters to assess a 2nd mill for permission to do that. And then that had to go before the voters again in 2 years. Initially, we passed that in 2020, and then it went before the voters again in 2022. And I must say it caused some confusion amongst the voters as to why they had to vote on it again. In our county, that question passed pretty overwhelmingly. The first year it was 68% for. The second time we had to go before the voters, it was 73% for.
Follow up, one more.
Thank you for answering that. My last question is, does the senior center apply for any grants? And if so, what is the average amount of those grants?
Ms. DeBoe, do you want to answer that or leave it
Yeah,
to?
and in fact, I'll have Mr. Mock answer that because there is a grant process, and go ahead, Angie.
Mr. Mock?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Weber. So we do apply for many different grants. Currently, we operate and manage roughly 15 different grants. And the amounts of those grants varies significantly from $15,000 to upwards and over $100,000. So it just varies depending on what the program is and where it's coming from.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for testifying today. Representative, do you have one question? Yes. Representative Johnson?
Yeah, I'm just curious, you're asking for, once this mill levy is passed, then it'll continue in perpetuity. As it stands now, the voters have to pass it you're asking for every 4 years. Is that correct? This would be, once we pass this bill as is, you would be granted that mill levy in perpetuity until it was rescinded by the voters of the county commissioners. Is that correct?
Representative Conley?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Johnson, that would be the way it would work unless the voters themselves determined that they didn't think possibly for whatever reason the senior center district wasn't performing, or if there was some kind of negligence, or that they're held to a pretty high standard. They have to do a lot of reporting on an annual basis, things like that. If they weren't following those statutes and those requirements, the district could, the county commissioners could actually go to a petition, and you could petition the commissioners to rescind the district.
Follow up, Representative Johnson.
Thank you. I just think that nobody likes, especially likes taxes. And if the overwhelming majority of your citizens vote on this tax every 4 years, then there's no problem. But once it's grandfathered in and just keeps going, sometimes it just gets lost. And I would rather have the voters vote on being taxed every year instead of, and I think it'd be up to the county or to have that election. I would like to amend this bill for that.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Representative Connolly.
thank you for your comments, Representative Johnson. The other thing this does is it puts the special districts on kind of the same playing field as the rural healthcare districts and the hospital districts. Right now, they don't have to go through this. And it just seems that it would be a good thing to put the senior service districts on the same playing field as the districts that provide our hospital care and our rural health ambulance districts.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to agencies, if there are any agencies that wish to speak on this issue. Okay, members, oh, I'm sorry.
I do have the AARP here.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to organizations. Agencies, is there any member of the public that would like to speak for this bill? Any members of the public present that want to speak against the bill? Okay, organizations, welcome. AARP, please state your name for the public.
Well, thank you, Chairman Knapp. My name is Tom Laycock. I'm the Associate State Director for AARP Wyoming. We're a membership organization for people age 50 and over. In the Cowboy State, we've got about 75,000 members. So as you've heard, the senior centers, from the senior centers, the interest is lengthening the time between votes to renew the senior citizens district levy. That change would put it on par with other special districts. The other thing it does, it actually gives a little bit of time for programs to take hold that are being funded by this particular levy. For the last 2 years, I've been the chair of the Healthcare Task Force's specific subcommittee on older adult transportation. As you may or may not be aware, one of the things that really determines whether someone is living independently in their home or moving into skilled nursing care, in a lot of cases, it's transportation. If you can't get to the store, if you can't get to the doctor, you're probably not in your home for very much longer. So one of the tools these communities can use to increase that transportation, one of the tools that our friends up in Buffalo have used is actually these senior citizen service districts. I'm not sure what you know about buying a bus. I didn't know anything about this myself, but unfortunately there's not a used car lot. You don't get to walk in and point at this one and say, I want that one, and get to drive off with it. So you can order a bus with senior service district money only after you've accumulated that funding. And so it can actually take a couple years start to finish to accumulate the money, pay for the bus, get the bus there. And so at that point, the locals who have approved the tax may or may not understand why it's taken so long, why they're not seeing another bus on the road. So really lengthening that time between elections, we think can actually help out, put some of these programs into play and, frankly, find metrics that really make sense to decide whether or not this has been successful or not. So those are the big pieces that we're excited about as we read this. In addition, it's important to remember that this, in fact, is not a tax in perpetuity. This is, Chairman Knapp, you're a county commissioner. You probably have a better idea than I do how this could get back on the ballot. In addition, that we also know that you can trigger a vote with 15% of the previous electors on a petition. And as the property tax initiative has shown us, that is something that's actually quite achievable. So that said, we thank you for considering the bill. It's something we support, and thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any other organization to testify? With that, I will close public comment. There's nobody else online. Okay. All right, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, it's moved
Second.
by Representative Hoff. Second by Representative Yin. Are there any amendments? Yes, Representative Johnson.
I would like to strike out the, let's see, line 9, starting line 9 on page 2,
Okay, this is page 2, line 9.
its propositions.
Steve, if you could get closer to your mic so we can hear.
Just strike out if the proposition to continue the mill levy, we would strike that out so that they would, every 4 years, they would vote on their own mill levies. I think that the way their property taxes are going, we never know. I would like the voters to be able to vote on that, that's all.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm asking about the amendment that you've requested. So you asked to strike out the new language from line 9 on page 2 to line 2 on page 3, correct? And my next question is part of your amendment, does it affect lines 5 and 6? To make sure that this is properly captured. I just want to be clear on what your amendment request is, sir. Thank you.
Then I think we would have to put in every 4 years thereafter until defeated. Is that?
So bring back that strikeout and then strike everything from line 9 on page 2 through 2 on page 3. Is that correct?
Every 4 years, they would vote on this, continue this mill levy.
Okay. Do we have a second for that amendment?
I second.
Seconded by Representative Brown. Any discussion on the amendment?
So, Mr. Chairman, with the amendment, the only thing that the bill would change then, and maybe the bringer of the amendment can tell me if I'm right or wrong, the only thing that would change would be that the first reauthorization election would happen 4 years instead of 2 years, and then every 4 after. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. Is that correct with the amendment?
Yes.
All right. Any other discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman, may I just clarify the amendment, that the amendment is to reinsert the language on page 2, lines 5 and 6, and to delete all the new language from line 9 to the end of the bill. I'm not to the end of the bill, I'm sorry, from line 9 to line 22 on page 2, and line 1 and 2 on page 3.
That is correct. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, amendment does carry. Now, any other amendments? Okay, we will call for the question on the bill. It is Bill number 122, Senior Citizen Service Districts Authorization and Renewal as amended. Please pull the board.
Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Heft.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Webb.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
9 ayes.
House Bill 122 does pass as amended. Next bill up is House Bill 79, bond elections, voter threshold requirement. Representative Stivar, welcome. If you could just please introduce yourself, introduce the bill, and walk us through.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is simple. I'm representing Stiver, House District 12. House Bill 79 is a bond election threshold requirement. All I'm doing on this, and I handed out you a page that shows and this is kind of out of date. I did this last year when I had this bill. The data I gathered from the last of bond elections. And all it's doing is adding in statute 2221 110, it's adding paragraph B. For any bond election that is held on the day other than the same as the general election, the proposal shall not be approved unless the majority of the ballots cast are in favor of the proposal and the total number of ballots cast is not less than 50% plus one of the number of qualified electors who voted within the political subdivision in the general election immediately preceding the bond election. And the reason I think we need to add that because the bond elections, especially in my county, here in Laramie County, the last one we had was 7,173 eligible voters. Only 347 voted. That's 4.84%. And a lot of these counties I looked at, they didn't have that 50%. The information of these bond elections are not getting out to people. And I think with this in there, that'll push the special districts to get the information out so they can get a better feel of the people or bring it on a general election ballot. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions? Vice Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative. So I'm just making sure I'm reading this right. So out of all of these, only 2 of them had more than 50%. Is that?
That is correct.
That's accurate. And
Chairman.
some were as low as, I mean, look at this, less than 5% of the voters voted for the bond.
Representative Stivar.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Locke, yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
And
Did you have another comment? Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you, appreciate it.
thank you.
We'll have any agencies that wish to speak on this, and we are short of time, so if you could limit it to a couple minutes. That's a challenge.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and really appreciate your work on this. I want to commend the drafter, Representative Stivar, for his work on this. He's been passionate about this for some time, and I want to express my complete and total support for this bill. In the last, especially 5 years, the legislature has opened up a lot of opportunities for special bond elections. I know the House Revenue Committee is working on that a lot, trying to get to closer where we can be reasonable on this, but it really has gotten out of control. I mean, as you noted, Representative Locke, I was going to talk about the same one you did, this fire district election, and look, I'm all for, fire's great. Fire, supporting our firefighters is very important. And fire departments are very important. But this was an election. And for a 4.84% turnout, it's just not, it doesn't work. And we have to have some way of creating a system where we consult the voters and we have some sort of threshold and we incentivize the localities to encourage turnout to a point where it is indeed a consultation with the voters. So I'm in complete and total support of this bill. I think in terms of the threshold, I think what Representative Stivar worked on, I've always thought is pretty good. We can continue to have a dialogue on that, but I like where it reads right now, and I'm in complete and total support.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Gray. Any questions? Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, question for you. So, I was thinking about our primary elections and trying to compare the turnout for those versus the turnout for these bond elections, which also happen outside of our general election day, right? Do you think, why do you think the 50% number is good versus something that generally decides what our legislature looks like, right? Which was like 24% last time. So why not a 24% threshold versus a 50% threshold?
Secretary of State Gray.
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be fine. That would be a fine amendment. Like I said, I'm open to the threshold on these, very open. And so if you want to, I mean, I can tell you 4.84% isn't going to cut it. So very open on the threshold, but I think that the concept, we've got to have some sort of threshold in statute. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Secretary Gray. Let's move on. Any other agency that would like to speak? Anybody from the public?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Julie Freese is online.
Okay, we'll take members of the public in the room first. So if you want to come up, and this would be either for or against. Welcome to the committee. Just have you state your name and then receive I
My name is Susan Lone, and thank you, Chairman Knapp and Representatives, let me speak here today. I am definitely in support of this bill. I was in the county that had that 4.8% that was decided upon, and it has affected a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And so one thing about this is how can you, if they don't get the information out to people, how can anyone make an informed decision? The last bond election that we had, which was on the off year, we actually got 2 information flyers the day of the election. All my neighbors in the surrounding area, no one received anything. And so I think they absolutely have to have some kind of requirements, or else these municipalities and everything aren't even going to bother to let us know. I think if you want to have, if you are looking for this kind of money, I forget what it was, but it was several million for the fire district, then you've got some money, skin in the game. Well, then let's get this out and notify the people in the areas. That's one of my things. The other thing is, several years ago, it was LCCC had a bond issue, and it was on the off year, if I remember correctly. And they did an excellent job of getting out the information. And, people had time. That's another thing we need, is some time to look at these items and what they're asking for. And because of that, I was happy to say that they defeated that one. It was a lot of money. And so that's a difference between knowing and not knowing. And I just think it's so important for voters to be involved, to know what's going on, and otherwise we're all in trouble.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Are there any questions? And would you like to add, if you state your name and tell us your comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patrick Lucas, Laramie County resident. I would just like to say that these bond elections are very important. In Laramie County, some of the residents have complained that niceties like recreation centers were on the same bond election with necessary infrastructure. So you couldn't vote for one without voting for the other. And so we felt that important things like fire districts should be fully funded. I don't think that we should conflate bond elections with primary elections, however. The primary and general election schedule has been the same for decades. Everybody knows when those elections are. Laramie County scheduled one bond election on an off year, and many people weren't even aware of it.
All right. Any questions of Mr. Lucas? Okay, we will have, Ms. Freeze is online, you said? Oh, it's for the next bill. Okay. Any other comments on this from the public? And are you guys speaking on this one or the next bill? Okay. Go ahead and come up, and if you could make it quick, we've got one more bill to do today, so identify yourself and let's have your comments.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Ashley Harpstreet. I'm the Executive Director of Wyoming Association of Municipalities. WAM is a private 501c6 private nonprofit association that has represented the interests of Wyoming cities and towns since 1928. Just a brief introduction. I know I'm very familiar with the chairman and your co-chair, but just for our new friends, we are in charge of providing vital education and training resources that enhances the capabilities of all local elected officials and other municipal leaders. We promote policies that prioritize local decision-making, ensuring the voices of the 68% of citizens who reside within these communities are heard and respected. We believe the best government is one that governs closest to the people, rooted in accountability and self-governance. Wyoming's Constitution affirms this in Article 13.1, Section 1 of Home Rule, empowering local leaders to make decisions for our communities. With that said, we are opposed to this position, or to this bill right now, House Bill 79, bond elections voter threshold requirement, just for some things to think about. By delaying that vote, that could drive up a cost of a project. And I think that's sometimes when we'll see bonds go on those every other year. We would definitely be open to amendments to make it more transparent and notifications to the public. So we are here to help and figure out how we can all serve the same people. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? All right. Jeremiah, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and comments from the commissioners?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. We represent the 93 county commissioners and 23 counties of this great state. For those of you that I haven't met, I look forward to working with you through the years. Mr. Chairman, we will establish our formal positions on bills next week, and we'll share that with you. I do anticipate that we'll have some concerns with this. Generally, bond elections come forward in off years for emergency issues in order to address those. So it's important that we have the capability of doing that. Would question whether it's appropriate not to listen to the voters that make it out for those elections. They're very well noticed by our county clerks and others. That said, I do appreciate the frustration that you're hearing and the notification that comes from those entities that are proposing those initiatives should be very transparent and widely available so that people know that there is something of serious consequence. And so if we need to make some changes and amendments there, that's certainly appropriate. Again, we'll get you our final position once we have it, but I do anticipate we'll have some concerns with this legislation.
Any questions for the Commissioners Association? Nope. All right. Thank you very much, both of you. Any other public comment? Okay, I'm going to close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move the bill.
Move the bill. May I make a comment?
Let's have a second first, and then if you have a comment. Okay. It's been moved by Representative Brown, seconded by Representative Johnson. Any comments from the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a resident of Laramie County, I can speak to the frustration that many voters feel when only 347 people showed up to vote, and actually many more showed up, but it was a very limited geography that was permitted to vote, and it was contrary to what the county had even put on their website and Facebook. And so this was very poorly communicated. And it's not that we were all in favor of it, but we would like to have a voice and to have information about the election itself and the particulars. And we didn't get that. So I feel some frustration along with the folks who have testified.
Thank you, Representative Lucas. Is there any other comments? Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, so I was looking at the Secretary of State's voter registration and turnout statistics. The lowest that we've ever gotten for turnout on the primary election is 25% in 2012. So I will move to amend the 50% number to 25%.
All right, is there a second to that amendment? So it's been moved by Representative Yin, second by Representative Johnson on an amendment. And just to make it clear, we're at 25% versus the 50% threshold. Is that 25% plus one?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So I'm just changing the word 50 to 25.
Okay, so on line 18, changing the 50% to 25% plus one. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
No.
The amendment carries. We'll move to the bill. Are there any other amendments to the bill? All right. I will call for the question for the roll call vote for the bill with the amendment.
This is a roll call vote for House Bill 79, bond elections voter threshold requirement. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Heft.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Webb.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
9 ayes.
House Bill number 79, bond elections voter threshold requirement does pass. I think we may have time for this one. Representative Gray, if we don't have time, okay. So next up on the table is House Bill 69, foreign adversary ownership and control of business entities.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing really quick, I just, on the last bill, I really quick want to note for the committee that it's not total turnout. It's the percentage of turnout of the last general election. So just keep that in mind as you continue to debate the threshold, please, because it's a little different from total turnout. It's the percentage. So you take the turnout from the 2024 election and then you'd, in the old way, take half of that. In the new way, take 25% of that. So it's not, comparing it to 25% of a primary is a little bit apples and oranges, so.
Okay, we'll let Representative Stivar know that as he works that on the floor.
Yes, thank you. Okay. HB 69, foreign adversary ownership or control of business entities. So again, I'm Chuck Ray, the Wyoming Secretary of State. To my left is Joe Rubino, our Chief Policy Counsel, our General Counsel, our Public Records guy. He does a lot of stuff. And then to our right is a new face for the new folks on the committee is Colin Crossman, the head of our business division. And this pertains to our business registration side of our duties of the Wyoming Secretary of State's office. Now, one of the things that is a change in our administration, in my opinion, is we've really tried to take on this fraud issue and not say everything's fine. We've really tried to say that we're going to have a culture of attacking fraud head on. And so as part of that, we requested in the 2024 interim a topic from the Joint Corporations Committee, which we also requested in 23, but unfortunately it didn't get heard. But in 24, we requested an interim topic on attacking fraud, and that was accepted. A working group was convened for that purpose, and we presented a suite of bills that were referred to the committee, and all of those were referred to the full legislature. Of all of those, this is the one that we are most excited about. Most of them are starting over in the Senate. They all were advanced out of committee today, but this is the one from that suite that was sent over to the House, and this is actually the one that we are the most excited about. And this would allow our office to administratively dissolve entities that are owned or controlled by foreign adversaries, such as China, Iran, and North Korea. Just by way of background for the committee, our office takes business fraud and the integrity of our business statutes extremely seriously. Under our administration, we have performed a number of administrative dissolutions under an existing statute that, according to our records, was not really ever utilized before our administration. And we've dissolved entities when we have proof that fraudulent documents are filed with our office and when I deem it to be in the public interest pursuant to Wyoming law. Although our office has instituted the administrative dissolution process for false and fraudulent documents filed with our office, something we activated in existing statute for really the first time, existing statute does not allow our office to administratively dissolve entities that are owned or controlled by foreign adversaries just on their face. So, for example, in the spring of 2024, we encountered a situation in which entities controlled by North Korea were found to be operating in Wyoming. In close consultation with the FBI and after our own thorough investigation, it was discovered that the entities in question could be administratively dissolved because of the filings they made with our office that they contained fraud. But if they did not contain fraud, we would not have been able to dissolve those entities that were operated and controlled by North Korea. Now, we took on North Korea and we won. However, in future instances, when we have these cases of entities controlled or operated by foreign entities, when there is not a fraudulent document filed with our office, we would like to be able to dissolve those entities facially because they are controlled or operated by a foreign adversary. House Bill 69 directly addresses this issue by allowing our office to administratively dissolve entities that are owned or controlled by a foreign government or a foreign non-government person determined to be a foreign adversary, including China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and the Maduro regime in Venezuela. And this was one of the solutions that we identified in the business working group and are very excited about this bill proceeding. Thank you. Complete and total support of the bill. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Vice Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary and team. And quick question, I'm just going to do this for verification. So as I read this bill, the way I read it is that list that you just specified, they are already considered, what's the right term? Foreign adversaries. I can't remember the exact term in that CFR, but my recollection is they are already considered that by our federal government. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Representative, thank you for that question. We do cross-reference the designation by the federal government on that for this purpose, and we do think that's the way to go on this. I think for completeness, and apologize about this, Mr. Chairman, is it okay if Mr. Rubino walks through the bill? We could also do that Monday. He will be here.
Oh, he will be here Monday?
Yes. Do you want to do that Monday?
Let's do that Monday.
Okay.
We've got a 2 o'clock hard stop.
Right.
So in order for the public to participate and.
So we'll do the walkthrough
We'll
Monday.
do the
but
walkthrough
Then
Monday.
I'll
That
have
would be
testified.
perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
So yes, in answer to your question, it cross-references the CFR. There's a lot of discussion on land ownership. I mean, you're a master at this, Representative Locke, on who should identify, should we cross-reference the CFR? How do we do that? This is really the best way to do it. And there's no perfect way, but we do need to get it done in this context, in the foreign land ownership context, and this is really the way to do it, in our
All right.
opinion.
Thank you. Perfect introduction. We'll continue this bill on Monday. And is there any other business before the board? All right. We will adjourn.